South Philadelphia, 2:17 a.m. The streets were half asleep, glistening under a thin film of rain. In a narrow brick apartment, light leaked from a kitchen window, one of the few still awake in the neighborhood. Inside, Clara Bennett scrubbed her hands until the skin stung. The faint metallic scent of blood clung to her even after the hospital shift was over. She tried to wash it away, but some stains lived beneath the skin. On the couch, Leo, her 8-year-old son, had fallen asleep in his school hoodie, arms wrapped around a stuffed army medic bear, the kind she used to hand out in field hospitals. His breathing steadied her. For a long moment, Clara just stood there, watching him. The ticking wall clock sounded louder than it should. Every tick was a heartbeat she once couldn't save. Then, from the hallway, came the muffled thud of a door slamming somewhere below, followed by a sharp, angry shout. Her body went rigid. In an instant, she was back in Iraq, sandstorm in her throat, the smell of iron and dust, someone screaming for a tourniquet. Her hands trembled. She closed her eyes, breathing through it. You're not there. You're home. Breathe in, breathe out. PTSD wasn't a ghost you could bury. It lived in every sound. Clara dried her hands, turned off the kitchen light, and whispered to herself, almost as a prayer, "Stay small, stay invisible." Across the river, another kind of night shift was in motion. A convoy of dark sedans rolled through the industrial quarter near Port Richmond, headlights cutting through the fog. At the center sat Vincent, the Phantom Falcone, the old king of Philadelphia's underworld. Silver hair combed neatly back, face carved by control. Falcone wasn't the kind of man you saw often. He lived like rumor, heard, not witnessed. But tonight, he broke his own rule. Beside him sat Marco the Surgeon Rossi, his second in command, a man with sharp cheekbones and eyes that never blinked long. He wore his tailored suit like armor. Marco was calm, almost serene, but beneath the calm was the quiet satisfaction of a plan already in motion. "This peace meeting," Falcone said, his voice gravel wrapped in silk. "It feels premature." Marco smiled faintly. "You've always said, boss, peace is cheaper than blood." Falcone gave a slow nod, eyes on the raindrops chasing each other down the window. "Cheaper. But it rarely lasts." The convoy turned into an abandoned shipping yard. Rows of rusted containers stood like gravestones. Falcone stepped out, rain catching the lapel of his charcoal coat. He'd built his empire on old codes: no drugs near schools, no blood unless necessary, no war with civilians. But those codes made him obsolete. Men like Marco were the evolution, colder, faster, and impatient. Inside the warehouse, everything smelled of oil and rain. "Where's the other crew?" Falcone asked. "Running late," Marco replied smoothly. "Let me check the line." Falcone stood under the skeletal rafters, hands clasped behind his back. His shoes clicked once on the wet concrete. That's when the lights cut out. The silence that followed was surgical. Then, from the dark, gunfire. Falcone spun, reaching for the pistol at his side, but a burst hit his shoulder before he cleared the holster. He staggered, half turning, saw the muzzle flashes, familiar faces behind them. His own men. Marco's voice echoed coldly. "You taught me loyalty, boss, but loyalty built on fear doesn't last forever." Falcone's answer was a shot through the dark, grazing Marco's sleeve before another round tore through his ribs. He fell to one knee. The rain outside masked the last exchange, a blade flashing silver, a grunt, the thud of a body against metal. When the echoes faded, the warehouse was silent again. "Finish it," Marco ordered, his tone sterile. "Leave him in the alley. Let the rats remember who owns this city now." They dragged Falcone out through the side door, his blood streaking the concrete like calligraphy. When they were gone, the storm swallowed the evidence. Falcone lay in the gutter, rain filling his lungs faster than he could breathe. His mind flickered between rage and the memory of a piano. A woman's hands playing Chopin, something soft, human. Then, darkness took him. Blocks away, Clara pulled her hoodie tighter against the rain as she left the hospital's side entrance. The city felt heavier at 3 a.m. Too quiet, too full of stories no one wanted to hear. Her shift badge swung from her neck, still damp from the laundry detergent she couldn't afford. She turned into the alley shortcut, a bad habit she hated but couldn't break. Halfway through she heard it, a ragged, wet exhale, like air escaping a punctured lung. She froze. "It's not your problem," her mind whispered, but then came a faint groan, not of pain but defiance. "Help! Me?" Clara's body moved before thought did. flashlight on. What she saw made her heart seize. A man in a blood-soaked suit lay against the dumpster, his eyes half open, his chest rising in shallow jerks. The metallic tang hit her nose. The exact smell that always sent her spiraling. Her pulse spiked, breath fractured. She saw another man, younger, dusty uniform, eyes begging her not to leave, the one she'd failed to save in Iraq. Her knees buckled. She pressed her palms to the wall, fighting to breathe. Then Leo's face flashed in her mind, his laughter, his trust. "Move, Clara." She dropped beside the stranger, checked his pulse. Weak, fading. The wound, gunshot, maybe two. One through the shoulder, another lower. Pneumothorax, she realized. A collapsed lung. Without intervention, he'd drown in his own blood. She looked around. No time, no ambulance, and she couldn't call the cops, not in South Philly. That never ended clean. She dragged him, God, he was heavy, across the alley, one slow inch at a time, into the hallway of her building. Rainwater and blood streaked the floor tiles like two rivers meeting. Upstairs, Leo stirred in his sleep as Clara locked the apartment door and knelt beside the man again. She grabbed the emergency vodka bottle from under the sink, tore open her sewing kit, and sterilized the needle over the gas flame. Her hands shook so badly she had to steady them with her knees. "Don't die on me," she muttered. "I already buried one." She sliced his shirt open with her trauma shears. The bullet wound hissed, a sucking chest wound. Clara cut an old credit card in half, pressed the slick plastic over the hole, and sealed it with duct tape. Improvised chest seal, field medic style. Then came the shoulder. Deep laceration, artery nicked but not severed. She poured vodka straight into it. The man convulsed, half conscious. "Stay with me," she ordered, voice cracking. She threaded the needle, stitched fast and ugly. Her hands remembered what her mind tried to forget: suture angles, tension, clamp timing. The old rhythm of battlefield triage. Minutes bled into an hour. When she finally tied off the last stitch, dawn was breaking through the blinds. Weak, colorless light over her kitchen floor stained dark red. Clara leaned back, breathing hard. Her arms trembled, her eyes stung. The man's chest rose, slow but steady, alive. Against every law of probability, he turned his head slightly, eyes fluttering open for a second. For the briefest moment their gazes met, hers raw with exhaustion, his glazed with disbelief. Then he passed out again. Clara stared at him, hands still sticky with blood, realization sinking in like a stone. She had just saved a man who looked like the devil himself. And she had no idea the world that decision had just opened. The storm had passed, but the street still glistened like a wound. Clara woke to silence. For the first time in months, no sirens, no street arguments, no dripping faucet, just stillness. Leo was already up, pressing his face against the blinds. "Mama, there are men outside." Her stomach tightened. She crossed to the window. Below, the street had turned into a funeral. Men in black suits, black coats, polished shoes stepping through puddles, lined up along the entire block, orderly, disciplined, silent. A small army, motionless under the gray morning light. At their center stood an elderly man in a gray coat, the kind of elegance that never needed a word to command attention. His silver hair was slicked back, his cane carved from dark wood. He looked up, straight toward her window, and gave the faintest nod. Moments later, a knock on the door. Clara's pulse stuttered. She looked down at the stranger she'd saved, still unconscious on her couch, his shirtless torso bound in gauze. His face looked less monstrous in daylight, though the scars hinted at the life that shaped him. She opened the door a fraction. The man with the cane was there, flanked by two silent bodyguards who looked carved from concrete. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, voice low, cultured, deliberate. "You saved the life of my employer, Mr. Falcone. He's resting now." Her throat dried. "He what?" The old man stepped forward, gaze calm but heavy. "In our world," he said, "life debts are sacred. You will never be harmed, never hungry, never alone." He turned, lifted his cane slightly. Outside, in a ripple-like choreography, 200 men bowed, 90 degrees, all at once. The sound of rain on umbrellas filled the silence like static. Leo's small hand clutched hers. "Mama, are they saying thank you?" Clara couldn't answer. Because she knew what that gesture meant. It wasn't gratitude, it was ownership. By evening, the apartment had changed. The cracked refrigerator was replaced with a stainless steel double-door model that didn't hum. The mailbox now delivered gourmet groceries she hadn't ordered. The rent envelope she'd been dreading vanished. When she asked the landlord, he just said, "Your account's covered, permanently." At first it felt like magic, a reprieve from survival. Then, like rot beneath paint, the realization set in. Every gift was a chain. Across the street, the black sedan appeared. Two men in suits inside, parked 24/7. They never came up, never spoke, just sat, watching. When she opened her curtains, they didn't flinch. Days passed. Leo brought home drawings from school, little stick figures of himself, his mom, and the two men across the street. "They don't blink, Mama." The world had shifted its gravity around her. Even the air felt owned. That night, Clara sat at the edge of her bed, phone in hand, typing a message she never sent. "Mr. Falcone, I want my life back." Then deleting it, because some debts couldn't be undone. Across the city, in a penthouse wrapped in smoke and glass, Marco Rossi watched a silent TV feed showing Clara's street. He flicked ash into a crystal tray. "She's becoming your symbol, Vincent," he muttered to himself. "You've replaced fear with sentiment." He turned to his men. "Send her a reminder, something gentle." The next morning, Clara found an envelope slid under her door. Inside, a photograph of Leo at school, taken from a distance. No note, no threat, just implication. She locked every window, checked under every bed, then checked again. By the third night, she wasn't sleeping. Every noise was Marco's hand reaching through her walls. At 2 a.m., she called the number on the black card left by Falcone's advisor. He answered after one ring. "I need to see him," she said, "now." 20 minutes later, a single car rolled to the curb. No words, just an open door. They drove through the city until the lights thinned into industrial silence. A small diner sat at the edge of the pier, its neon sign half dead. Inside, the world's most dangerous man sat alone in a booth, nursing black coffee with one hand bandaged in gauze. Falcone looked smaller than myth, human in the wrong light. "Mrs. Bennett," he greeted without surprise. "You shouldn't have called." She sat across from him, shaking with anger she didn't know how to contain. "You've turned my life into a prison. My son's being watched. I don't want your money or your guards. I want you gone." He stirred his coffee once, then looked up. "You think you can walk away?" His voice was steady, quiet enough that it cut through the hum of the fluorescent lights. "The moment you saved me, you entered a world that doesn't forgive neutrality. I didn't choose your world. Then you shouldn't have saved a man from it." The line landed like a gunshot. Silence stretched between them. Outside, a truck's headlights swept across the diner windows, flickering over their faces, hers raw, his carved in restraint. Then Falcone's tone shifted, softer, curious. "Tell me something, Clara. Where did you learn to keep a man alive with nothing but vodka, a needle, and tape?" Her eyes flicked up. "Army combat medic, Iraq." "And what made you stop?" She hesitated. Then, "I couldn't save the last one. A kid, 18. I watched him bleed out in my hands." Her voice thinned. "That's what happens when you hesitate." Falcone leaned back, studying her like she was a riddle he hadn't expected to find. "So when you saw me dying, you weren't saving me, you were saving him." Her jaw tightened. "Maybe." He nodded once, a gesture of understanding, not judgment. "In my line of work," he said, "we call that penance." When she left the diner, the sky was breaking toward dawn. And for the first time, Clara wasn't sure if Falcone was her savior or her mirror. The days after blurred together, men in suits, whispers on the street, Marco's eyes behind every shadow. Clara began hearing things. A door creak that wasn't there, a whisper of tires at night. Then, one morning, Leo pointed at the doorstep. A small dead pigeon lay there, its neck neatly twisted. No note this time, no message, just silence, heavy enough to crush air. That night, Clara sat on the kitchen floor, trembling. Her hand hovered over the vodka bottle, but she didn't drink. She remembered what Falcone had said. "You're in it now." If this was his world, then she had to learn its language. She opened the blinds, met the eyes of the two men in the car, and didn't look away. The next morning, they were gone. It happened on a Thursday. Clara was folding laundry when a crash exploded outside, two cars colliding, metal screaming. Then came a woman's voice, panicked, shrill. "Help, my child." She ran to the window. Smoke, a fire catching on one car's hood. Her pulse spiked, that same old trigger, the battlefield reflex igniting in her chest. Downstairs, one of Falcone's guards blocked the exit. "Ma'am, please stay inside. That's an order." "Someone's hurt out there." "No, ma'am, it's not what it looks like." Then she heard it again. a child's scream, sharp and familiar. Leo, her instincts overruled everything. She shoved past the guard, sprinted into the street. Smoke burned her lungs. The overturned car hissed. She reached for the door handle, and the world exploded into movement. A van screeched from the alley. 2 masked men grabbed her. Another pulled Leo from the sidewalk where he'd been playing with chalk. "Mom," she screamed, kicked, bit, but a blow to the side of her head dropped the world into black. When she came to, the air reeked of gasoline and mold. Her wrists were bound to a chair, Leo tied to a beam across the room, terrified but unharmed. The warehouse walls loomed around them like the memory of hell. Same one, she realized, Port Richmond. Marco stepped from the shadows, immaculate as ever. "I have to hand it to you," he said smoothly. "You're quite the legend in our circles now, the woman who saved the ghost." Clara's lips split when she spoke. "If you touch him," he raised a hand, "relax, the boy's safe, for now." He crouched in front of her. "You see, Falcone thinks mercy is a virtue. I think it's a disease, and you." He touched the edge of her bandaged hand. "You're the infection." She spat blood at his shoe. Marco smiled. "Ah, the soldier in you. Shame he'll never see it die." Word moved through the city like current through wet wire. In less than an hour, dark sedans poured from side streets and service alleys, converging on Port Richmond. The old codes wakened. Calls to men who owed debts, to men who loved the stability the Phantom once kept. Doors opened, lights died. The city held its breath. Falcone stepped from the lead car without ceremony. His shoulder was freshly dressed, the sling hidden beneath a black coat. The elderly consigliere stood at his side, face unreadable. "Marco wants a spectacle," the consigliere warned. Falcone's jaw set. "He'll get an ending." Across the yard, men took positions like pieces on a chessboard. No yelling, no bravado, just the sound of rain on sheet metal, and somewhere far off, a freight horn. Falcone looked up at the warehouse. He remembered the smell of oil and old rope, the floor slick with his blood, the shadow of betrayal. He had built an empire on discipline. He had almost lost it to ambition. He had been many things, protector, tyrant, orphan of his own rules, but tonight he would be something else. He touched the rosary hidden in his pocket, then pushed open the door. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of rust. Bare bulbs threw hard cones of light across the concrete. Clara sat taped to a metal chair at the center, wrists bound, temple bruised. Leo was tied to a beam 12 feet away, knees tucked to his chest, eyes dry from crying too long. When Clara saw Falcone, a breath shuddered out of her she hadn't known she was holding. Marco stepped from the shadows, sleeves rolled, calm as a surgeon between cuts. He held a pistol the way some men hold a pen, like an extension of intention. "Welcome back to church," he said. "I kept your pew warm." Falcone's men fanned along the mezzanine. The consigliere stayed at the door like a solemn witness. No one fired. Not yet. Marco's smile was small. "I expected an army. I got a prayer." Falcone glanced at Clara first. "You all right?" She nodded once. "Leo." Falcone's eyes found the boy, their gaze held for a fraction. Falcone lowered his pistol by a hair, as if the smallest child could command the biggest man. Marco clocked the gesture and brightened. "There it is, the tumor." He raised his gun toward Leo. Affection. Guns lifted around the room, safeties clicked. "Don't," Falcone said. Not a shout, an order. Marco tipped his head. "I offer you a trade, your crown for your myth. You die like a man, and the boy walks, or we test your new religion." Clara met Marco's eyes and spoke evenly, cutting through the noise. "Marco." He looked at her, almost indulgent. "Yes, nurse?" "You wanted to be seen," she said. "Consider this a mirror. A flicker, an annoyance. I'm not the one on trial. You made yourself the judge when you put a gun to a child," Clara said. "But you're not angry at him? Or me?" She leaned forward despite the tape biting her skin. "You're angry at being replaced." Marco laughed softly. "By whom? Him?" He jerked the gun toward Falcone without looking. "Or by you?" He pointed at Clara now, a stranger who walked into his legend and made him sentimental. Clara didn't blink. "By time." The word traced a cold line through the space. "You served a man who was never going to crown you," she went on, voice steady, tone clinical and kind. "You cut out the rot and found bone. It didn't give. So you keep cutting. The problem isn't surgical, it's grief." Marco's jaw tightened. "Be careful." Clara's voice softened. "He taught you discipline. He didn't teach you what to do when love shows up disguised as weakness." She nodded toward Leo. You see a glitch in the code. I see a man choosing not to make a child into a story he has to survive. Silence held. The rain outside sounded like static between stations. Marco's grip tightened. You don't know what he made me do. I know what you wanted him to do, Clara said. Anoint you, make the room smaller until you fit. She leaned in. He couldn't, not because you're not capable, because there's no room left when fear calls the shots. She nodded at his hands. How long have they been shaking? He sneered. They're steady. Then look. He did, out of reflex. The barrel trembled a millimeter, the tremor amplified by the weight of 20 eyes and one truth. For a heartbeat, the mask shifted. The man underneath peered out, tired, young somewhere, abandoned by something he could never name. Then the mask clicked back in place. Enough, Marco snapped. He strode to Leo, grabbed the boy by the collar, hauled him forward. Choose, Vincent, God or king. Falcone's men tensed. The consigliere's throat worked. Falcone stepped forward, gun low, palms open. He was close enough now to see the sweat at Marco's temple. Let the boy go, Falcone said, and the old gravel in his voice turned warm. He's not a message. Marco pressed the muzzle to Leo's head. Make me, he whispered. Time narrowed to a wire. Clara stood without standing. Every nerve awake, every memory of triage and streetlight and breath counted on her fingers. She kept talking, not to fill the silence, but to keep Marco inside it. Marco, she said, voice low, as if calming a patient about to bolt from a gurney. You won. You made him come here alone. You got him to admit what scares him. But if you pull that trigger, you'll never be more than a rumor of a man who shot a child. And rumors have short reigns. Marco's eyes skittered to her, back to Falcone. The gun wavered a hair. Falcone moved. Not a lunge, not a tackle. A step with purpose. Right hand extending, left shoulder turning, a small rotation of the torso that placed his body squarely between the muzzle and the boy. The shot cracked. It sounded like a door slamming in a house he used to live in. Falcone took the round in the shoulder he hadn't offered before, spun, and went to a knee. He folded Leo into his coat with the same motion you use to shelter a candle in wind. The warehouse erupted. Falcone's men surged. Marco fired 2 more times on retreat. Bullets sparked off steel. The consigliere's voice cut through like a siren. Hold fire, and the madness constricted back into shape. In seconds, 3 men had Marco face down, guns skittering away, wrists cinched with a zip tie that burned the skin. Leo was crying now, silent, shaking sobs that found a home in Falcone's coat. Clara tore free of the tape with the help of a knife from a guard and crossed to them, hands already at work, compressing the wound, eyes steady. Pressure, she murmured. Breathe, look at me. Falcone did. In his gaze lived a strange calm, the look of a man who had finally matched his insides to his face. You okay? He asked Leo. The boy nodded into his chest. Falcone smiled with only his eyes. Good man? Clara's voice softened. Don't be a hero now. Too late, he rasped. They dragged Marco upright. The room formed a circle without speaking, the oldest shape for justice there is. The consigliere stepped forward and laid a pistol in Falcone's good hand. The weight settled with an old memory. Beginnings in back rooms, rules recited like scripture. Betrayal ends one way. Marco lifted his chin. Pride and terror warred along the lines of his face. Do it, he spat, or they'll never fear you again. Rain ticked on the roof like 1,000 seconds dying. Falcone looked at Clara. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't commanding. She was watching the man choose what kind of story this would be for a boy who had already seen too much. Falcone turned to Marco, gun heavy, history heavier. You wanted my throne, he said softly. Here's the truth. There is no throne. It's a chair in a room full of ghosts. He lowered the gun. No, Marco whispered, disbelief flooding him faster than rage. No, Falcone nodded to his men. Cut him loose. A murmur of shock rippled. The consigliere's eyes flicked. Warning or awe, even he didn't know. Falcone stepped close enough that only Marco could hear. But everyone could read the shape of the moment. You don't die tonight, Falcone said. You live with what you did. Leave this city. If I ever see you again, I will not hesitate. Marco searched Falcone's face for cruelty, and found only the thing he had feared most. Mercy. It made him smaller. It made him human. It made the room bigger than he could hold. They shoved him toward the door. He stumbled into the wet dark, like a man released from a sentence he didn't believe in. Falcone let out a breath that had been living in his chest for years. The room exhaled with him. He swayed. Clara caught his good arm. "You lost blood," she said, "but you gained something inconvenient." A conscience with a pulse. He almost laughed, then winced. "Hurts more. Always does." Weeks later, South Philly pretended not to remember. The sedan across the street disappeared. Neighbors began to nod again. The refrigerator hummed like a normal thing. On a dim morning feathered with fog, a single car pulled up. No entourage, no black parade. Falcone climbed the stairs slower than he used to, coat buttoned, bandage hidden, gravity less so. He knocked once. Clara opened the door. The apartment smelled like coffee and toast. Leo's backpack waited by the couch. For a breath, it looked like any life. Falcone stepped inside and placed a manila envelope on the table. A set of keys lay on top, silent as metal always is in moments like this. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Deed. An old farmhouse outside Eugene, Oregon. Papers for a new name. Bank accounts you don't have to be afraid of." He paused. "No strings." She studied him. "Is there such a thing?" "There is if you cut them yourself." He looked at Leo. "You like trees?" Leo nodded. "Do they have snow?" "Sometimes. And rivers you can hear before you see." Clara touched the keys. They were warmer than they should have been, as if someone had been holding them a long time. "If I take this," she said, "am I free?" Falcone's eyes softened in a way that didn't belong to kings, or maybe belonged to the best kind of them. "That night, you saved my life," he said. "But in that warehouse, you saved my soul." Silence held. The walls listened. Clara closed her hand around the keys. She didn't trust tears, not for long, so she used motion instead. She packed the last box while Leo tied his shoes in a double knot. They left nothing that could claim them later. On the sidewalk, the city was the same as ever. Steam from a manhole, a bus sighing at the corner, pigeons arguing under a fire escape. It did not bow. It did not bless. It simply continued. Falcone stood by the curb, hands in his coat pockets, the shape of a man who had made peace with a kind of loss that gives more than it takes. Clara opened the car door, then turned back. "You'll be all right?" she asked. Not because he needed help, but because it matters to say it. "I have work to do," he said. "Different work." He looked thinner. He looked truer. Leo waved. Falcone waved back in a small, almost shy motion that didn't fit his legend, and therefore suited him perfectly. Clara slid behind the wheel. The engine caught. She checked the mirror. Falcone was a figure in the mist, then a man in the rain, then a memory at the end of a block. She pulled away. Oregon, weeks later. A gravel drive, a porch with peeling paint. Pines guarding the property line like old friends. Leo ran the parameter with a stick, test driving the edges of a new map. Clara carried a box into a kitchen that smelled like cedar and second chances. On the counter, she set an old credit card, cracked, sterilized once by flame, beside a clean glass of water. She didn't need it anymore. She kept it anyway. Outside, the river they'd been promised spoke in a voice you felt more than heard. Clara stepped onto the porch and let the air pass through her in a way she hadn't allowed in years. Behind her, the radio clicked on. News, weather, someone selling tires. Ordinary things. The extraordinary had been paid. Far across the country, in a city that didn't forgive, a man walked through his own house and stopped at a doorway he had avoided since grief built it. Inside, a piano he had found and bought back waited in the light. The lid creaked open. Keys breathed dust. He did not play. He simply touched the wood and listened to the silence like a hymn. Back on the porch, Clara watched Leo balance on the fence, arms out, a boy practicing flight without leaving the ground. She smiled, small and private. No bowing men, no sirens, no cages, golden or otherwise. Just a woman who kept someone alive long enough to change, and in doing so, changed the story she told herself about failure. She closed her eyes and let the sound of water write the next line. Thank you for watching this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, leave a like. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to life. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you won't miss the next powerful cinematic tale we release every day. Your support keeps these stories alive.